Did you know that transportation experts and UX designers have more in common than you might think? As Roshini Durand explains, end-user data is the most valuable tool that a policy designer can have. Check it out.
We're not developing policy for cars or for roads, but ultimately for human beings to have a better life. As engineers, that's something we do remember, but sometimes we tend to forget because we're so focused on solving technical issues. We're just not designing a policy because we want it to be beautiful. We want to make it relatable, accessible, all those things. And in order to make it accessible, you do need to connect to that human aspect.
How do you gather data so it's an accurate representation of an entire state?
I guess it depends what type of research you're doing, right? When you look at doing quantitative research, when we do pilots and we engage with hundreds of participants or thousands of participants, there are some techniques where you feel, okay, what type of diversity do you want? You want geographic diversity, you want age, gender, race, ethnicity diversity. So there are some statistical techniques that you use to make sure that you get representation in those populations. So it all depends on the type of research you're doing. Sometimes, I'll take Kansas as an example, if we want to find out more about rural participants or participants living in agricultural communities, you tend to oversample. If you're doing qualitative research, you're really talking about smaller samples. So I would say you would go between 10 to about 40 because you do tend to spend a lot more time, focused time with participants, about 1 to 1.5 hours. And even though it's a small sample, what you want is kind of a broad spectrum of different perspectives. So you try to hit kind of extremes, like just to figure out what the world of opinions may look like. And again, every time you would think about what you want to prioritize, right? You can't do everything. Honing in on what it is you want to find out and then figuring out what type of diversity you're looking for is super important.
If you want more expert strategies on public engagement tactics, visit cdmsmith.com/communicators. Okay, back to the conversation. Once you're done gathering all this data on end users, how do you use it to develop transportation policy?
That's a super important part, and that's where we see most of the disconnect. We put a lot of effort in gathering data to design policies, and then at some point we need to make that policy tangible because we want to test public opinion. And what we realize is that between the intent, between the research idea and the guiding principles and how you implement it, there can be a huge gap. And there can be some distortion in the intent and what people end up seeing because there are so many moving parts in between. You have experts jumping in, third-party vendors jumping in to implement your solution. Keeping the connection to the research is so important. When we use user-centered research, as we did in Kansas, it kind of reminds us what users have told us and what they care about. And sometimes it helps us care enough about their needs and remember their needs in order for us to convert that policy into that tangible thing that makes sense for them. And the disconnect often comes there, exactly there, where we are doing things in a discrete way, like research, implement, and that user-centered design and research that we've been doing has been the connector in many of the projects that we've been leading.
Roshini, it was so great talking to you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Love talking with you and the team. Thank you.